Hello and welcome to Living the Zolkeen. I'm your host, Racy Paul, and in today's episode, our guest is author Kenneth Johnson. Kenneth is one of my favorite authors, and his most recent book, I believe, is called Jaguar Medicine. Kenneth is a very thorough scholar with particular focus and interest on the Quiche traditions. In this episode, we talk about divination, Imosh, and dreams, as well as some of the different color combinations used in Nawal art. I hope you guys really enjoy this episode. Let's talk about Imosh type stuff because we all know you're Imosh. So
Right.
the one thing that came to my mind was divining type stuff, counting seeds or beans or any of those types of things. I'd even heard of some other traditions like I can't remember, putting wood in water and stirring the water and seeing how it moved, and all kinds of
Yeah.
divining type traditions. And then the other thing that I also remembered was about dreams, but because that is a fascinating subject, and literally I have not even really scratched the surface yet. But why don't we start off about divining?
Okay. I'm actually going to try to weave all those topics together. First of all, there are any number of types of divination. It's true. I've never heard about wood and water. I've seen a fair amount of their counting the site seeds, which they lay out in little groups of four and pretty much at random. They grab into a bowl of site seeds when the client asks the question, and then they lay the site seeds out on a divining cloth, four little groups at a time, and then they count them as if they were counting the days. And if it was a very time specific sort of question, like, should I sell this business? Or what's up with all my sheep and goats getting sick? If you were asking that sort of a question, they would probably begin their count on the day in question. Like, here it is 9 Kot, so they would start counting 9 Kot, 10 Kan, and so on and so forth until they got to the end of the series. And when they got to the end of the series, it would end up being some sort of a result. Let's say, just for example, let's say you ended up on 3 bots, then you would interpret the meaning of the reading of the divination in terms of 3 bots. And 3 bots for a question like, should I sell the business? Bots is always positive, so they would say, oh yes, but not right away because 3 is kind of an uneasy number. It was sort of like, yeah, it's going to be good, but it will probably be better a little bit later on. Or if it were a question about your farm animals, and I use that as an example simply because most of the Highland Maya really are agricultural, and you do hear a lot of those sorts of questions. Then the answer would be actually, since 3 is a small number and kind of a difficult number, it's a small difficulty, but because bots is positive, there's going to be a positive outcome. So they read like that. And also, they divine with crystals, staring through crystals. But this is more of a Yucatec tradition. In fact, it's a very strong tradition in Yucatan, and I've never really seen it. In the town I lived in, they said the last real crystal diviner had died in 2008, so I kind of missed him by a couple of years. And then, of course, there is the question of dreams. And if you're talking about Imosh, you could almost say that each and every Nawal, each and every day sign, probably has its own spiritual gift. Someone born on Bots or on Noch, which is to say on Chuen or Kaban, to use the Yucatec, Someone like that might be exceptionally skilled, exceptionally good at the kind of divination with seeds that I've just described, because it has to do with the higher mind. Now, Imosh, in particular, since they are totally locked into what Carl Jung would have called the collective unconscious, the collective mind of humanity, these individuals tend to be very good with dreams. And as you said, this is a fascinating topic. So if you don't mind, I will talk today a bit about dreams. Okay. First of all, it is common for Mayan people on every level of society, by which I mean even those who are not shamans, who are not day keepers, who may not even be that mystically inclined, it's common for family members to discuss their dreams with each other and for good friends to discuss their dreams with each other. But when they discuss dreams, they actually use a whole different style of language for it. They use the same kind of phrasing, the same kind of syntax, the same kind of rhythm to their words that we would find in mythology and folklore. For example, the Mayan creation epic has a certain cadence to it, a certain poetic rhythm to it, which is characteristic of the kind of speaking that goes on when people speak of myths. And so when they talk about dreams, they use the same language, which I always found fascinating. It's almost as if they have a sort of just basically they're keyed into an awareness of what Joe Campbell once said. A dream is a private myth, and a myth is a public dream. They seem to understand this intuitively, so they use a whole different way of speaking when they work with dreams. And if we want to get really deeply into dreams, then we could talk about the way that dreams are used among the day keepers, because when you take on a student and agree to train that student as a day keeper, one of the ways in which you keep track of your student's spiritual progress is to monitor his or her dreams. So whenever you visit your teacher, your spiritual guide, for more instruction in the day keeper's art, you're likely to be asked, and what have your dreams been like? And here we use a special technique for dreams. One must not simply remember the dream. One must keep a record of the day upon which the dream occurred. So in other words, we're going to use the sacred calendar itself in order to interpret dreams. Let us say that I had gone to sleep here last night on 8 Akbal and then woke up again in the morning on 9 Kat. Well, obviously, you've been dreaming during the night, so which day is it? That was my first question when one of my teachers explained the art of dreams. Which day did I actually have the dream? I don't know whether it was before midnight or after midnight. And, of course, there are times when we do know, oh, I had that dream real early in the night. And there are other times when we know I had that dream just before I woke up in the morning. And if so, then there really are some day keepers who would classify the early dream with 8 Akbal and the later dream with 9 Kat. But in many cases, because we sleep all night, this simply isn't going to be practical. So as a general guideline and rule of thumb, we always interpret a dream in accordance with the day that we woke up. And this is just sort of playing it on the safe side, because after all, it was at sundown the night before when they lit the candles in the shrine room and said their prayers to the day whose energy is just beginning, the day whose energy will grow during the night. So that day sign at least is always present, and we can always interpret a dream according to the day we woke up. And
I was just gonna say, I read you wrote that somewhere or said that somewhere many,
yeah,
many years ago.
I
And
did.
I, in my phone, I started jotting down my dreams in my phone. And I would always jot down the morning I woke up on. And whenever I'd go to specific places, like usually a new place, like I go travel somewhere, and I would just get strings of dreams. And I have like a journal of years of dreaming, and the Nawel of the day and all that, and like, who knows what the hell it means? I don't know. But
Okay.
but but basically, the reason I wanted to say is, like, just because you said that changed a habit of mine, so it had an impact on me, big one. So thanks.
Okay. Well, hopefully, I can give you a little bit more of a clue about what you might do with this big dream journal.
Right.
Okay, so first of all, we have to distinguish between ordinary dreams and shamanic dreams, because not all dreams have the same importance.
Nice.
And dreams which occur very close to morning are naturally considered to be more important. And that seems to be a worldwide tradition. So if a dream happens just before you wake up in the morning, chances are that one might be important. And then the next consideration is the whole basic idea that the Maya have about what really happens to you on a spiritual level when you dream. And they believe that the soul is a double entity, as you might say. Just like everything in Mayan thought can be doubled, just like we have day and night, masculine and feminine, summer and winter, just as they seem to think naturally in those yin-yang sort of polarities, even so, the soul has its physical and also its spiritual dimension. And it is the spiritual soul that we're concerned with. And this spiritual soul, not surprisingly, is called the Nawal, because our spiritual soul is, in fact, the energy of the day sign upon which we are born. It is that component of ourself which lives eternally with the gods of time, the Nawales, the 20 day signs. And it is that aspect of the soul, the spiritual soul, the Nawal soul, which is not tied to the body. It is that part of the soul which likes to leave the body and go wandering through astral realms at night. And this would also appear to be a universal belief. I was just investigating some comparative mythologies the other day, and I found it among Siberian shamans, this idea of the wandering dream soul. For example, there could be many dreams where we simply do not do not connect with the Nawal at all. For example, it's 9 Kot here today, and if you had just had a dream about that fascinating girl who lives next door, well, that might not have anything to do with it. That might not be, the kind of important dream that we're looking for.
Well, you just
But,
said 9 cot, and then you said sex, and then girl.
yeah, well, yeah, okay, a bad example.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't say sex, but yeah, okay.
Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt, sir.
that could be because Kot is a very sexy sign. Okay, if you had, for example, just a little dream about your job.
Sure.
Okay. But on the other hand, Kot means a net bag, a bag that you fill up with karma, or a bag that you can fill up with abundance. Now, if you have a dream about going shopping and putting food, which is the abundance of Kot, into bags, then obviously you are in the realm of the Nawal. Okay? You are in the world of today's specific day sign from the calendar. And then you're going back to the analogy now, or the little scenario about your spiritual teacher. If you were an apprentice daykeeper and you're talking with the senior daykeeper about your progress along the path, and he hears that you've had a dream about packing groceries in bags on a Kot day, well, that would be important. And then you would start to talk about it and discuss it. And I'm not going to say that it would mean any one particular thing. One bit that I noticed about the Maya is that they're very free form with the way that they interpret dreams, meaning that they don't base their interpretations on the kind of fixed meanings that you would see if you went to the book outlet store and bought some cheap publication called the Gypsy Witch Dream Book. You don't see stuff like that with them. They will talk about your life and what's going on with you and what certain things mean to you personally to get at the meaning of this dream because they recognize the complexity of it. What is important is the fact that your spiritual soul went wandering and ended up in the realm of this particular day sign, as we can see from the fact that the day sign's symbolism was just all over the dream. So this is, in fact, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that because that was the part that was confusing or bewildering or too much for me to digest, was sort of the divining aspect of interpreting dreams, that it was not a textbook. And I was always weary of such textbooks. Somebody's like, the Gypsy Book of Dreams says this. I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, exactly.
But the fact that it is such like a divining process, like you got to Sherlock Holmes your way through there, and that skill or that sight to be able to see the symbols or to see the connections or the system or something like that was something that's basically very smoky to me. I don't quite comprehend, what that is, what it looks like, how it works,
Okay.
etc.
So, two pieces, the idea that you might have to devote a whole lot of energy, not all of which is purely intellectual, but some of which is intuitive, that you might have to devote a whole lot of energy and thought to these dreams is perhaps what we would call the bad news. The good news is that it isn't really that common for us to remember a whole dream that has powerful shamanic links to a specific day sign.
Hmm.
This doesn't happen every day, so you won't have to do it all the time. That's one piece of good news. And the other piece of good news is that, to get back to one of our other topics, you could always find a friend who was born on an Imosh day. Because
Oh,
Imosh is said to have, as it's, like I had mentioned,
yeah.
there are some day signs that have just these particular spiritual talents, like Kawok. Even though we don't, I've not met a crystal gazer in Momos. Kawok is said to be good with crystal gazing. Tihash is said to be good with energy healing. Bots and bots would be one sign. Nok would be another that are said to have a real great talent with divining with the seeds. But Emosh is said to have a particular talent for dreams.
Interesting.
And so if you get really stumped on a dream, you could always call up an Emosh friend who will probably be able to give you some clues. And then, of course, sometimes we just get stuck because we don't know where a particular theme from a dream was supposed to lead. We don't know where it was taking us. There may be bits and pieces that we do not remember. And so, what do? You've just got these fragments of a dream, and some of them you've pondered and you've pondered, and you really still don't get the meaning. So, what do? And this was another bit that I found fascinating because just as just as the way they talk about dreams in that mythic language seems to indicate that the Maya intuitively have a grasp of what modern psychology in our Western world, what we see as the link between mythology and dreams. They have also developed a technique of working with dreams which is basically identical to what the Jungian psychologists call active imagination. And how they came up with this, how the Maya came up with this in Central America, and then some other guy in Europe in the early 20th century comes up with the same thing independently of each other. I don't know. Maybe that's just part of the magic of the world. But in any event, it goes like this. What you try to do, and if you were actually an apprentice to a shaman in Guatemala, or probably in Yucatan as well, your teacher would put you into a meditative state and tell you to start visualizing what you could remember of the dream, especially how it ended, and he might even guide you verbally through that dream, through the ending of that dream, and then in imagination, which is why in the West we call it active imagination, you go beyond it. You let yourself go into kind of a wandering, imaginative mind, the same place where people go when they, write a song or write a play or a poem or exercise their creativity, and you just allow your imagination to do what it will do, and in imagination you finish the dream. So when you get stumped on a dream and you're not sure what it means, you can always put yourself in a meditative state, try to return to the dream, and then play the poet, the songwriter, the author, and just let your mind go back into the dream and take you where it will, and your soul, your spirit, can finish that dream for you and give you some sort of insight into the whole nature of it.
Hey,
And okay,
I was just
go
going to
ahead.
say, that is a really interesting practice. That's going to, one of my favorite things about interviewing people is that everybody always gives me something to chew on for the next couple of days.
Okay.
So I'm going to be chewing on that one for quite a while. The idea of returning to a dream that maybe is confusing or that you couldn't possibly understand.
Hmm. Right.
That is a very perhaps practical and enriching exercise. So yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Well, since you've done a lot of creative work, written shows, and
Mm,
so on and so forth, you may find this a little easier than a
right.
lot of other people because you're accustomed to just letting go,
Yeah.
to letting your imagination rush off
Yeah.
visually and in terms of, sound and
Yeah. Yeah.
what you see, what you hear. You're accustomed to rushing off into other realms. Some people who are intensely practical and who live pretty much their entire conscious lives in the practical world might have more trouble doing this than you would. But you can develop this part of yourself
Right.
and
Take mushrooms.
take mushrooms. Yes,
Yeah, just do like a
that's
little
certainly
bit. You'll turn on the faucet, and you
yeah,
won't be able to stop it. It's like,
yeah,
but for
yeah.
people that have practiced with that part of themselves, they don't need to take mushrooms. They could just put in themselves into a state where that the faucet is just on, and it's just coming. What do you call a stream or Imosh, which is kind of the why I asked you about this is because this kind of
Right.
has to do with Imosh.
And that is why Imosh has the reputation that it does in terms of gaining wisdom from dreams and also for a talent with interpreting dreams. Because these people, part of the meaning of their Nawal is the depth of the ocean, the great ocean, which has always been a symbol of our collective mind, our collective consciousness. And this is where Imosh is most comfortable. Of course, this is where the practical people of this world really fear to tread. They fear to dive into that big ocean because, after all, there could be scary sea monsters down there and other things which could shake up our safe, nicely contained little vision of the world around us,
And predictable.
predictable and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. But
Yeah.
then, of course, the upside is that this is where all poetry,
Right.
all music,
Yeah.
all mystical vision actually comes from. It comes from
Stories.
those ocean depths. So you might find the pearl, you might meet the mermaid instead of the sea monster. And, one of the things that makes people so mystified by the Imosh born, or so perturbed by the Imosh born at certain times, it
Good
must be
word. Good
admitted,
word. Yeah.
is the fact that they live there in those deep waters, and sometimes they're a total train wreck because they've encountered too many sea monsters down there. Sometimes they're just smiling their way through life with great joy because they've found the pearls and the mermaids. For example, just in terms of the kind of images that a person can bring forth from that collective ocean of consciousness, we find that Walt Disney was born on an Imosh day.
Right.
And so was the great Italian surrealist director Federico Fellini. Certainly people who were capable of diving into that great ocean of the subconscious, the unconscious, almost every day of their lives, and coming up with pearls and magical insights and beautiful, amazing visions. So Imosh, when it comes to holding a job, getting the paycheck, dealing with the post office and the groceries, Imosh can be a total train wreck. But they can also be the most valuable friends that you will ever have if you're a practical person and you're suddenly faced with the power of the unconscious and you need a little guidance. Then they can really help you. Then they are the people that you want to go to because they live there, they understand it. And of course, Imosh has a reputation for craziness, but then again, anyone who lives in the practical, objective world all the time is going to perceive these visionary souls as being a little bit nuts.
But they have those gifts for going down deep like that. That really, like you said before, applies to this whole situation with dreams, because this is something you can say to rational people. Even they've all been shaken by dreams. Every single person has been shaken by dreams. They've woken up going, "What the hell? What the hell just happened?" Or "What was that?" Or forget it. It was just a dream. Never mind." Or I'm gonna forget about that." Like, everybody's been touched by this, and kind of culturally, we don't know what the hell it is, and we just kind of brush it to the side. But this idea of taking it seriously is fascinating, and I think true. Like, it touches something in your heart where you're like, yeah, it is true. It is true. There's something in these dreams. We should take them seriously. And then that's where these gifts that Imosh people are, native to, shine and are of service to others, and really make a huge, contribution and impact.
Well, and this, of course, is why Imosh is said to have the talent for dreams. And here again, the Maya would seem to be very much in step with some schools of contemporary psychology. To the Maya, the world of dreams, this visionary astral world where we go when we dream, where we can encounter the spirits of the gods of time and the spirits of the day signs and all these other magical beings who exist in their own reality. The Maya recognize that this is the same place that artists and poets and composers go to when they create their beautiful work.
Yeah.
And it is very much, at least in my experience, having also, when I was younger, I wrote a show.
Musical?
A musical, yeah.
No way. I didn't know
Well,
that.
I wrote the libretto. I wrote the play and the words, and my writing partner, Richard, wrote the music.
Okay.
And we had been hanging around, playing in bands.
Yeah.
And then the local, the local, what would you say, Civic Light Opera got this huge grant from the California Arts Council to put on an original show. So they hired Richard and me to write it. And so I'm going to say with full confidence here that the place where I go, when I'm in the world of dreams, is the same place that I went to write all those song lyrics and to write the libretto. So I really do think that the realm of the arts and the realm of dreams cannot be separated from each other. And perhaps when we dream, each of us becomes, even the most practical of us, becomes an artist, at least, in that other part of ourself which takes over late at night when we say asleep as if that were not conscious, but it seems from most of the medical research that I've looked up that dreams are actually a different state of consciousness.
That's a very interesting statement. I would like to go back to.
Okay, yeah, let's go back somewhere because I just came to a full stop. And
No, it's okay. It's okay. I would like to go back to the sort of the exercises about dreams. Like at the beginning of this topic, we were kind of talking about, the way of interpreting a dream is very subjective, and it changes from circumstances. Depending on the person and etc. And so I would like to go back to sort of the skill set of interpreting the dreams. Not to create a
Okay.
kind of a loose general word of methods or or things to see. So if you have any thing you could say about that, would be awesome.
Wow. I don't know how to really. You know, all I can do is to reiterate some of the main points that I've made. And I think, these 3 or 4 points would be the beginning of acquiring an interpretive skill set. First of all, keep a dream journal and keep a record of the day, the Mayan day, upon which the dream occurs, or at least the day upon which you wake up. That's number one. Number two, look at if you feel that this is a powerful dream, and I think we know when we have a dream which is just, the remnants of things that have happened to us during the day, and when we have a dream that's full of symbolic, powerful, intense images, because they're just different. And so if you feel, this is number two, if you feel that you've had a dream that is very powerful and very significant, and this might, like I say, it's not something that has to control your life, because maybe this is only going to happen once every 3 or 4 months, right?
Right.
Maybe just several times a year. But when you get a dream like that, then the third point is to read everything you can, and if you're not too familiar with the day signs of the Mayan calendar, read everything you can about the day upon which the dream occurred. Or if you are already familiar, that's fine. You can start just like going through your mind with the mental checklist, remembering everything you know about that day sign, and then look at the dream to see if there's any symbolism from the day sign which appears in the dream. Like, for example, did you have that dream on an eagle day? And did you exchange money in the dream? Because money is one of the big things about Eagle Day. If you had the dream on a Kwok day, because Kwok is the sign of the divine feminine, did you meet a powerful or unusual female figure in that dream? Just various things like this, various clues which come to us from the symbolism of the dream. And then finally, there's two finallys. Number four, ponder it, because, and don't spend too much time intellectualizing about it, because you may never reach the source of the dream if you intellectualize too much, but instead just feel the dream and allow yourself to really feel how you relate emotionally to each of those symbols that comes to us from the Lord of the Day, because it is very personal, and you're very, I think, very much on target to be skeptical about the Gypsy Witch Dream Book.
That's a good word,
Gypsy
Witch.
Not everybody has the same associations. Some people hate snakes, other people
Right.
love them, right?
Yeah.
What's scary for one person could be a lot of fun for somebody else. So it's very individual, and you really have to find your own way through it. And then finally, the fifth point, if you get stuck, try going into a state of meditation and reliving that dream. Easy to do if you've got a really good visual imagination, and if you don't, you may have to work on this. And then just let the dream continue there in your own fantasy world and see where it takes you. Because if you're really just not getting any insights about it, that might be able to help. So those 5 things are perhaps what I would call your basic skill set.
Very nice and very cool.
Interpretation of dreams. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really, really actually appreciate that, especially the exercise or the technique of going into that state and trying to re-access the dream. That is definitely something that I'll have to give it a try.
Hey, and if, for people out there in this world who have no financial worries, those blessed people, they could always go to a Jungian therapist, because Jungian therapists know how to guide you back into dreams to finish a dream. Like I said, this is a technique which shows up among the village Maya in Central America, who know nothing about European psychology, and it's also a technique from Jungian psychology, and the Maya seem to have been one of the few indigenous peoples in whom he was not particularly interested. So it's interesting that they independently came up with the same technique. But for most of us, it's just going to mean really contacting that artistic part of ourselves that makes images and makes dreams. And if you have any Imosh at all, anywhere in your 9-sign horoscope, you might want to, start lighting candles on Imosh days to make that part of yourself a little bit stronger and a little bit more proactive about going into the dream world and reclaiming the dream, finishing the dream, completing the dream.
That is very, 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 very fascinating, and I will. I'll give it a shot, and I'm sure some of the folks out here listening will also give it a shot. I know a lot of us have read your books and have been following you for a long time. Okay, another question which popped up recently on your Facebook is you started showing artwork of these nawals, which has the multiple colors.
Yes.
And this I've noticed over many years as being very real. That's what Maya do. That's what Quiche people do, is they make these artwork with the designs of multiple colors, nawals. I've seen that for a long time, and a lot of green, it seems.
Okay.
Anyways, the question I wanted to ask you was about this topic. What's up with that? What's going on with that? Because it seems confusing with all the stuff on the internet.
Okay, well, first of all, the drawings that I'm using actually were drawn by a Quiche daykeeper.
There you go.
And he's a young man in his early 20s, but grew up in a family of daykeepers. Both his parents are daykeepers. This is Gregorio Itzep. He's the son of Don Rigoberto.
Gregorio, what a great name for a calendar keeper.
Yeah, and he was initiated when he was only about 15 as a shaman. And you will find that the Maya are frequently, we tend to think that we have to do everything just exactly the way we see it drawn. But the Maya are actually very free form when they're working with their own hieroglyphs. They will go anywhere in their imaginations, and that includes color. Now, it should also be said, just to avoid making it seem as if color doesn't matter, it's also true that if you look through a really complete book about the day signs, you will probably discover that each day sign has its own associated color.
Right.
And sometimes they have 2 or 3 colors associated with them.
That's confusing too.
Different than just the colors of the 4 directions, but they have their own personal colors. And you can use these in meditation. They each have a color. They each have a correspondence in the physical body, like eagle, zakin, that's the eyes. The road of life, that's the feet that you use to walk upon the road. Your whole nervous system in general, with all its vitality and its force, is Bats, monkey. So each one has a color, each one has a physical correspondence, and each one has a sacred place. For instance, Akbal has a real affinity with caves. Toch or Muluk in Yucatec has a real affinity with large rock formations. Eek likes snow-covered mountains, and Chikchan, the serpent, likes to gaze at the night sky and take inspiration from the stars. Every day sign has its own sacred place. So that's color, direction, sacred place, and part of the body. Each one, of course, has an animal. And we most of us, if we know anything about it at all, we know the animals that are associated, because the names that are translated into English all over the internet are usually the names that were taken from the Aztec version of the calendar, and these folks named many of the signs after the animal totem. So obviously Zakin has eagle as its totem, and Chikchan has the snake, and then there are some that you would never guess, like
Right.
Eek is the hummingbird,
Right.
and Akbal is, I actually forget Akbal, that was not a good example. Bat, okay.
That's one of them, anyways.
Yeah, okay, so each one has its animal. And I even came across, and I've only come across this once in Momestenango, they each have a botanical correspondence. And these,
Interesting.
so they have flowers and herbs. And if you have an imbalance with some sign, let me try to think of a good example where I actually know what herb it is. Okay, eek is mint. Okay, it's the mint plant, and if you had a lot of the more difficult eek qualities, like moving too fast, being too intense, just blowing through life like a hurricane, then they would feed you lots and lots of mint tea to calm you down and to put that day sign back into balance. So and I've wandered a long way from these colorful day signs that you see drawn by calendar keepers, but I'm just saying that in reality there's a lot of freedom that they use doing this, because there are just so many correspondences, magical correspondences we would call them, to each of the day signs, that we pretty much can go anywhere that we please when we're finding our own set of meanings and our own significance for them.
Now that actually is an interesting question, because it leads. Sorry to go off into a tangent here.
That's okay.
But it leads to the idea that on the internet there's a lot of new aged interpretations which are untraditional.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
yeah, you've noticed, and in a way, there's something really important about the untraditional ones, because we're experiencing the Zolk'in through our culture, and so we have to find ways to relate it to our lives, our everydays, and so we do that, by relating it to all the things that we see and that are around us and whatever. But then, it starts to drift away from the traditions, and yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of a dance in a way, because I mean,
Okay, yeah, and this is very interesting, because even symbolic archetypes do change over time. And I'm going to give one example from Western astrology, and then I'm going to give another example from the Mayan calendar. Okay, for example, in Western astrology, we now think of Aquarius as being these perky, eccentric, liberated, freedom-loving people who just go off in every direction like a hunk of firecrackers. But if you go back to the first astrological writings, in Hellenistic Egypt, you will find that Aquarius was considered a very gloomy, dark, brooding sort of sign. So the archetype itself has changed over the space of 2,000 years. Similarly, if you look at Akbal as it was written down among the Aztecs and in the Yucatec books of Chalam Balam, and the Aztec material was collected by a Franciscan monk in the late 1500s, and the Chalam Balam books were written in the 1700s in Yucatan. We will find that Akbal at that time, the meaning of darkness or house of darkness was very prevalent. This also is kind of a gloomy sign with a lot of wisdom, but also the potential for a lot of tragedy in one's life. Whereas now, and this was something I was also just discussing on my page, now the average, I won't say the average daykeeper because they always have the inner mystical meaning of the signs, but the average campesino, the average day worker who just grew up with the day signs because they're Maya but isn't really a mystic themselves, they think of Akabal as the sign of romance. So we can see that in the past 500 years, this archetype has also changed greatly. And so what we witness now is a lot of people, to get back to your comment, we witness a lot of people who are playing fast and loose with the meanings of these day signs. And in some cases, I have to say just flat out, some of these folks are just inventing their own meanings out of their own heads. Because they don't really know, so they're just responding to the little bits and pieces of symbolism, and they might have got that symbolism from somebody who semi-understood an Aztec source, or they might have gotten it, from somebody who's writing from an authentic Mayan highland source. You never know where they got it, but they're just reacting to it.
Sure.
So where do we draw the line between allowing archetypes to be, the fluid things that they are, the movable motive agents that they are, as opposed to just making the tradition really dark and muddy by messing around with it? Where do we draw that line? And here, I don't have a clear answer.
Okay,
But,
say it.
but
Say
the best I can say
Uh-huh.
is to return to another example from Western civilization. The poet T.S. Eliot was renowned for breaking all the rules of meter in poetry and writing free verse. He was one of the first people to become popular with free verse without an established poetic rhythm. It wasn't in iambic pentameter or any of these other rhythms that had names, etc. But he would just go without rhyme, without and just the music of the words themselves. And then a lot of other people started doing it, and it just sounded dreadful. It just sounded dreadful. So they asked him about that. And he said, what you have to remember is that you must first understand all the rules of grammar and poetry before you are prepared to break them. And I would say, similarly, you must first have an understanding of the authentic tradition of the day signs before you start to use them really inventively and intuit new and different meanings for them.
I think just like you said about the dream and trying to keep it on the day that you wake up by staying on the safe side, I
Yeah.
think that's a pretty good precautionary measure to kind of
Okay.
stay on the safe side. I agree with that, as sort of a general piece of advice to just kind of insulate the thing from just turning into a train wreck. I think that's really practical. That's good. I really like that. I'll try and keep that in mind.
For example, no, go ahead.
Oh no, no, it's okay. Go on your example.
For example, a lot of criticism has been leveled at Jose Arguelles
Nice.
for messing around with the calendar and not counting the days correctly. But sometimes he was capable of some interesting insights. Like, for example, he calls Imosh the dragon. And in fact, the crocodile that is Imosh is the primordial reptilian creature that sleeps at the bottom of the tree of the world. And in some cultures, there's a serpent at that. Like in Norse mythology, there's a serpent at the bottom of the tree of the world. And it symbolizes all kinds of primordial energy. And Arguelles recognized that the Chinese concept of the dragon as raw, vital, primordial energy at the base of all things was basically the same concept. So he's playing around with it, and he's inventing new names for day signs that the Maya would not have recognized. But on the other hand, he obviously knew where he obviously knew something about the symbolism before he started playing with it, because it is in the same symbolic frame of reference, and certainly I don't think anyone would have objected to the idea of Imosh as a dragon if he had only simply agreed to count the days correctly. So that's one example. And yeah, we're going to see a lot more of this because a lot of us sort of thought that interest in the calendar would just plummet and go nowhere or into a deep hole after 2012. But instead, I come across more and more people who are discovering the calendar and more people who are interested in learning about the contemporary indigenous tradition. So it becomes a very nice cultural interchange in the sense that the Maya themselves, now free to practice the native religion, as they were not for many years, and they got that freedom in December of 1996, they are going through a cultural renaissance where they are re-envisioning their ancient traditions for modern times, and the so-called modern world, or at least the Western world, what we used to call the first world, they're listening and they're paying attention and they're interested. And yeah, we can expect people to come up with their own interpretations, but hopefully they will take the time to ground themselves in the traditional knowledge before they go too far afield with it.
I think that's yeah, very practical advice, and that's good. Hopefully, we can by creating more media. I mean, I've just been creating this podcast just for exactly actually a little bit more than one full Zolkeen round.
Okay.
And the day I started it was on 13 Eagle.
Oh, that's perfect.
That's its birthday.
Yeah. As I just mentioned a few days ago, this is a day that is celebrated throughout the Highlands. It's celebrated to the point where even though we got up at 4:30 in the morning to go out and try to find one of the altars where we could do our ceremony, by the time we got there at 5 a.m., every single altar was taken. With people who were already doing their rituals there. You couldn't find a place to do a ceremony. 13 Eagle is that popular. We had to walk out into the forest. One of the healing women, Kiranderas, who was guiding us, knew about a little shrine out in the woods. That was the only place we could find. 13 Eagle is a great day to start a new endeavor. So I wish you well on that.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a coincidence, and one of my best friends is born on that day, and also I've been reading your posts, so I kind of had some of that knowledge with me. So you kind of answered the question about the colors.
Okay.
You basically kind of said that they do vary, but they do in fact each have one of four cardinal directional
They
colors,
have that. Yeah.
and they have a
Uh-huh.
secondary color. Do you remember what some of those colors were?
Let me just minimize this screen and get into. Um, okay. Here we go. Bots. I have for that red and orange.
Right.
For I have, what do I have for Um, white or light blue.
Uh-huh.
For ach, I have brown and white. For ish, I have yellow and brown.
Mhm.
For eagle, our good friend today, the eagle, I have dark blue or light blue. It's a very blue sort of blue condition, I guess you would say. And for the next one, which is Akmak, I have gray and also black and white. We're going to see black and white come up again. But in Noak, we have again the dark blue and the light blue, like we had with Eagle. It is Tihash. And as the sign of duality that it is, we would expect this, but Tihash has black and white as its colors, which makes a whole lot of sense. Green and blue for Kawok, which goes along with the meaning that Kawok, in terms of the body, can be the heart. Because blue-green, the color of jade,
Right.
was the color of the center of the four directions, and the heart is the center of our consciousness. So that all works very nicely together. Whereas now moving to Akpu, we get red and yellow. Imosh, we have yellow or green, or light blue, which is the color of water. Water is always important with Imosh. White, and here again we get the dark blue and the light blue for Eek. That comes up as a fairly common combination with the colors. Here again, red and orange for Akbal, which we've had before. A lot of these are repetitious. Brown and yellow once again for Cot. And I think, if I remember correctly, after this, green and red for Khan, they all pretty much go in sequence. Yellow and orange again for Kame. I might as well finish it up here. Beige and yellow for Kek. For Kanil, we have green and white. Toke is red and white. And finally, for Z, we get yellow and white again. So those are the colors that I have kept notes on.
I appreciate you sharing that. It seemed
Okay.
a little bit repetitive or whatever. But I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is repetitive. There are a lot more day signs than there are primary colors. Yeah. Okay.
well, yeah. Thank you very, very, very much for taking the time to chat with me. I got a million more questions, but that's good because
That's good.
yeah, it leaves the future open.
Yes.
I if there's anything you're up to that you would like to plug, do you have any workshops or any cool books or
I
blogs?
do, but I don't have dates, so I'm going to say watch my Facebook page for this. But in fact, I am developing a series of workshops. There will be an astrology workshop
Mm,
and also a sacred places workshop, which is a two-parter, and it's based on a series of lectures that I did at San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. And both of these are going to be online seminars, and all of them, the astrology classes as well as the sacred space classes are going to be held between now and the beginning of December, because in December I'm going back to Guatemala for a while. So I'm going to do these classes, and also for those who get the Mayan Magics e-magazine, there is going to be a new article coming out, which I'm also going to put on my own blog space. And again, you can watch for links on my Facebook page to this when it gets finished. I'm in the middle of it now, and it has to do with the way that the people of ancient Mexico perceived energies within the human body. They have a system which is equally complex to the Chinese system of Qigong, internal alchemy, or the Hindu system of the chakras. And I'm going to give like the Aztec names for it and everything. And that'll be coming up in just a few days.
Oh, in a couple of days.
Yes.
Very exciting.
It'll be published in Mayan Magics at the beginning of the new Trisena.
Is there a particular reason you chose the next Trisena?
No. I just finally, after a long break to take care of other practical concerns, I'm finally just beginning to get back into my favorite work.
It sounds, I'll be looking forward to it for sure.
Okay, Paul. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay.
And good luck with everything. And thanks so much just for all the hard work that you put in over the years, all the blogs, all the interest, all the, just really great work that you do. I really appreciate it. I know a lot of others really appreciate it. So just want to say thanks.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
All right, have a good one, man. Wow, that was a really great episode. I had a lot of fun talking to Kenneth, and I will definitely try out some of those exercises. As always, please check out our Facebook page, and if you would like to leave a comment, iTunes is the best place. For everybody who's enjoying this program, keep on living the soul keen. Until next time, peace and love.